Yeah, we all know the fight has already started, so the issue of taxes will also play an important role in the election campaign in the UK. However, a possible abolition of inheritance tax in the UK would not become a reality until 2025 at the earliest. Inheritance tax is not only a popular, controversial topic here in Germany. In Great Britain, Conservative members of the House of Commons and the Daily Telegraph are drumming up support for its abolition. And with this, the approaching elections cast their shadow ahead. The issue of taxes will become a dominant election issue in Great Britain because both the Tories and Labour assume that they can score points with the voters with this issue. The Tories want to focus on the inheritance tax, which is hated by the British, as they say, during the election campaign. This is what correspondents report from London unilaterally. Internally, the Conservatives are discussing the move to completely abolish inheritance tax. They believe they can win over a particularly large number of voters with this. The volume of the tax is £12 billion per year, and according to experts, a reduction in the tax is not enough to inspire voters. And according to media reports, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak will announce the reduction in inheritance tax at the Tory party conference in Manchester. And meanwhile, 50 lower house members of the ruling party are drumming up support for its abolition, and as I said, they get a lot of help from the Daily Telegraph. According to opinion polls, it is the most unpopular tax. Apparently, many in the party hope to be able to get additional votes in this way. Defense Secretary Grant Shapps called inheritance tax an unfair, punitive tax. Well, they do need some good news after what is floating around anyway. And I don't mean the sewages this time. Rishi Sunak is reportedly considering axing part of HS2, putting him at odds with MPs from across the political spectrum, and probably voters as well. The Prime Minister is apparently alarmed by the runaway cost of the rail project and has targeted the northern leg for cancellation. It would mean an end to the Birmingham to Manchester route, while Sunak is also said to be considering terminating the line in a West London suburb rather than in Euston as planned to save money. According to The Times, Sunak is considering axing much of the line after he was shown figures suggesting the overall price could top £100 billion. Senior Tories, including former Chancellor George Osborne and ex-Conservative Deputy Prime Minister Lord Haseltine, were among grandees warning that scrapping the Manchester route would be a gross act of vandalism, which would mean abandoning the Northern Midlands. Vandalism again, they have a lot of this week. 5 Labour mayors have also warned that failure to deliver in full on HS2 would leave swaths of the north with Victorian transport infrastructure that is unfit for purpose. However, Defence Secretary Grant Shapps has said it would be crazy not to reconsider the project in considering spiralling costs. While the Prime Minister considers whether to scrap the northern leg of the HS2 rail project, some parts have already been axed. Following years of concern over spiraling costs, the government announced in November 2021 that the eastern leg of the line from Birmingham to Leeds was scrapped. The land needed for the route remained safeguarded in case future governments choose to fund it. In July 22, a £3 billion branch of the HS2 network designed to speed up rail journeys between London and Scotland was quietly ditched by ministers, provoking outrage from rail industry groups. In March this year, it was confirmed that construction between Birmingham and Crewe would be delayed by 2 years. And Transport Secretary Marc announced the delay, blaming increasing costs that were forecast to rise to £4.5 billion. Work at Euston Station has also been paused for 2 years, with reports suggesting the line could stop in a West London suburb instead to save money. The HS2 project was first given consideration in January 2009 when the then Labour government looked into its feasibility. It took another 3 years for the project to be given the green light by the Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition government. However, formal construction did not actually get underway until September 2020, when then Prime Minister Boris Johnson said the incredible project was crucial for our country. Since then, and before any work even started, the project has been blighted by delays and concerns over costs. The first phase of the project between London and Birmingham was supposed to open at the end of 2026, but this has now been pushed back between 29 and 33. And there are also major delays to the second phase, which was originally scheduled to open in 2032, but is now expected as late as 2040, 20 years after construction began. Labour's official stance on HS2 is that it wants the project to be delivered in full. So once again, we have finally a difference between them. However, the party's messaging on the issue appears mixed, with Shadow Cabinet Office Minister Steve McFadden suggesting that the costs would need to be reviewed. He told BBC Sunday with Laura Kunsberg that a future Labour government would have to look at the costs of everything they do. And he said, "I want to see what this costs and will make the decision in the manifesto." However, as I said earlier, 5 Labour mayors across the UK have made it clear that they want the Prime Minister to stay on track with HS2. Sadiq Khan, Andy Burnham, Tracy Brabin, Oliver Coppert and Steve Rotherham issued a joint plea to Sunak not to cut HS2 further and turn the Northern Powerhouse Rail project to be delivered in full. Ministers have refused repeatedly to commit to building HS2 in full since Sunak and the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt met this month to discuss further major cuts to this multi-billion-pound scheme. The cost of the program, thought to be the biggest infrastructure project in Europe, is believed to have roughly tripled to about £91 billion since it was originally devised in 2009. The project has been beset with delays and mismanagement, but remains the biggest regeneration effort in the UK in decades, backed by successive governments going back to when Gordon Brown was Prime Minister. Business and political leaders in Manchester and Leeds said huge plots of valuable land had been ring-fenced for HS2 for nearly a decade, and abandoning the line's northern leg would mean billions of pounds lost in investment. In Leeds, land worth about £5.6 billion had not been developed because it had been safeguarded as the site of a new HS2 station since 2013. Transport for the North, the statutory body set up by the government, passed a motion on Wednesday calling on the government to deliver HS2 and NPR in full. The government is yet to make an official announcement on the fate of HS2, but there have been reports that Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has been alarmed by the rising cost of the project, with suggestions it could exceed £100 billion in the end. The Times newspaper reported Mr. Sunak was considering reallocating money to other regional transport projects, including the Northern Powerhouse Rail project, which would include a mix of new and upgraded lines to speed up journeys between Liverpool, Manchester and Leeds. The history of High Speed 2, that's HS2 in the UK, can be tracked back to the early 2000s, when the governments began to study the need for a new high-speed rail line to connect London with the Midlands and the North. As I said, in 2009, the Labour government published a report recommending the construction of HS2, and in 2010, the Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition government confirmed its support for the project. The HS2 project has indeed been controversial since the beginning, with opponents arguing that it is too expensive, environmentally damaging, and overall unnecessary. However, supporters of HS2 argue that it will boost the UK economy, create jobs, and reduce congestion on existing rail lines. In 2012, the government published a detailed plan for HS2, which would see the construction of a new high-speed railway line from London Euston to Birmingham, Manchester and Leeds. The HS2 project has been subject to numerous legal challenges, but all of these challenges have been unsuccessful. In 2020, the government gave the green light for the construction of the first phase of HS2. The problem with the cost of HS2 is that they have been rising steadily since the project was first proposed. The original budget for HS2 was £50 billion, but this has now increased to over £100 billion in some calculations. This is a significant increase, and it has raised concerns about the value for money of the project. And there are a number of reasons why the costs of HS2 have increased. One reason is that the project is more complex than originally envisaged. For example, HS2 will need to cross more rivers and roads than originally planned. And this has led to increased construction costs. If you need tunnels or bridges, it's more expensive. Another reason for the increase in costs is inflation. The cost of construction materials and labor was increased significantly since HS2 was first proposed. This has also contributed to the overall increase in costs. We know this from all building projects. And finally, there have been a number of delays to the HS2 project. These delays have also added to the overall costs of the project. The increase in the cost of HS2 has been met with criticism from some quarters, and some critics have argued that the project is too expensive and that the money would be better spent on other priorities, and that's what obviously Sunak is following now. Others have argued that the project is still worthwhile, but that the government needs to do more to control the costs. Yeah, that's something. Yeah. Overall, the problem with the costs of HS2 is that they have been rising steadily since the project was first proposed. And this has raised concerns about the value for money of the project, and now the Tory government might act on it. And if you want to know some other information about British politics, the EU or Brexit, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.